Hello, welcome to the Raw Podcast. My name's James Copley. Delighted to be joined by BBC Radio Newcastle Sunderland commentator Nick Barnes. Barnesy, how are you doing? How's the international break treating you?
All good. Well, frustratingly, I think as everyone, I think we'd rather have seen some football this weekend for Sunderland. But there we go. We're in the new week now, ready for Fulham at the weekend.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to run through a couple of little transfer tidbits, and we'll look at the Fulham game as well. I don't know if you've had a chance to see this yet, Barnesy, but the front page of an Italian newspaper has Juventus interested in Granit Xhaka in the January transfer window. Now, I think we can file that under the not going to happen, can't we? Because whilst there may be a little bit of interest, it would be madness for Sunderland to let him go. And I don't think he'd actually want to go anywhere, would he?
I think you've answered it. Yeah, I can't see Xhaka going anywhere. He's seemingly loving life at Sunderland. He's got a project, which was one of the reasons he sort of came on board with Sunderland, because he bought into what Kirill Louis-Dreyfus is trying to do. And the season started so well that I can't for the life of me see for 1 minute why he'd want to leave. He's moved his family here. He's settled. He's enjoying it. The football's good. Why would he move? So I think, yeah, you can file that one away. I'd be amazed if anything developed in that respect. And certainly the club aren't going to let him go. So I think, pure speculation and wishful thinking on Juventus' behalf.
I mean, really, it underlines how good a job Sunderland did in the summer in terms of persuading Granit Xhaka to come to the northeast, because AC Milan have been mentioned in the summer. Juventus, he'll have had other suitors as well. I mean, these are top level clubs, yet he was swayed by the prospect of Sunderland, which, when you think about where the club was 4 or 5 years ago, is extraordinary.
It is. I mean, it is an extraordinary story, and when you hear the background to it and the fact that Kirill Louis-Dreyfus just wouldn't give up. He was determined to try and get Xhaka to come to Sunderland. But it says a lot about the vision that Kirill has for the club. It says, I think, a lot about Xhaka's ambitions as well, because I think, we all understand he's doing his coaching badges. It's a road he wants to go down. He's being given that opportunity at Sunderland. Régis Le Bris is very open about the fact that he's more than happy for Xhaka to be his leader on the pitch, to manage the games, to even make decisions in the game affecting formations and tactics. So to give that much license to a player, I think it just proves that Xhaka has got a very big influence at Sunderland. But I think in terms of his own ambition, I'd be very, very surprised if a couple of years down the line we don't see Xhaka in a dugout somewhere as a head coach, because he's got, it seems to me, all the credentials at the moment to go down that road. And he'll have been well versed in respect of having a mentor in that sense in Mikel Arteta, who he played with at Arsenal for 4 years. Former player, went down that road, and I can see Xhaka doing the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of his arrival at Sunderland, it's hugely encouraging, isn't it, to hear about Kirill Louis-Dreyfus and how he was able to tempt Xhaka. He wouldn't leave him alone. He rang him several times and sold him the vision. I've heard a lot of interviews from ex-players, particularly coming towards the end of the career, and they get really disheartened by the fact that they don't get to speak to anybody proper at the club. They don't speak to the manager. It's all maybe through a head of recruitment, and they're not really sure if they're wanted. But with Louis-Dreyfus, he made sort of no secret about his desire to sign him, and I think that level of input, used perhaps sparingly, can be quite important at a football club. Obviously, alongside Régis Le Bris, Florent Gassolfi, Christian Speakman. The point I'm getting at is that as a team at the moment feels like it's functioning quite well.
It is, and I think it's quite interesting, the dynamics of the ownership. I think if we go back to when Kirill arrived, a little bit sort of dipping his toes, if you like, in English football, his network was very much built upon the network of people he knew within French football because of his parents, because of Marseille. And I think we're seeing that come to fruition now. He's much more comfortable with that aspect of the football, because the fact that Florent Gassolfi, he sort of would have known in the past, Régis Le Bris, he knew about Xhaka being Swiss, that all those components now coming together once I think Kirill Louis-Dreyfus felt more comfortable in his skin in English football and seeing how it works and where he wants it to be and the model he wants to follow. So he is aligning it now, I think, more to the vision he had originally, to the model perhaps he had in his mind when he first came in, and knew he wouldn't be able to set that ball rolling until Sunderland were probably in the Premier League, which he has now achieved ahead of schedule, and we're starting to see it take shape, I think, as he would have it in his mind's eye.
And crucially as well, Barnsley, although we might not have appreciated at the time, especially as fans, but a fair few mistakes along the way that have helped sort of Sunderland get to where they are in terms of recruitment.
I think that's inevitable. I don't think any club will go without making mistakes. I think more commendable in a way is the fact that this summer's recruitment in bringing in, well, if you take Mark Guiu as the 15th player, and that wasn't necessarily a mistake. You know, the reason he went back to Chelsea was that wasn't of Sunderland's makings, that was Chelsea. All 14 that have remained, you can pretty much, I think, say have been a success. Even Diarra, it's not his fault he got injured, but what we saw of him before he was injured looked like there's a player there. So, you know, man for man, it looks like the recruitment they did this summer was absolutely spot on. Very, very hard to say that any of those players that have come in, you wouldn't say would naturally walk into a first team in the Premier League anywhere. They've all hit the ground running. They've all looked good. Some have started more slowly than others. Ronaldo, arguably, but I think Traore is probably the biggest aspect in that respect. He's taken a few games to get up to speed, but he's getting there now, and you can see there's a player there. So, you know, that recruitment has been perfect, almost the perfect storm. But you're right, they made mistakes in earlier season, but I think a lot of that's to do with the fact that they were playing in League One and then the Championship, which were divisions that, for Kyril Louis-Dreyfus, a little bit of the unknown. I mean, you know, even for us, League One, very much the unknown. And you're relying on instinct, you're relying on agents, you're relying on recruitment to make sure you've got the right players to get you out of that league, and also relying on the fact you've appointed the right coaches, right managers. And we saw it took, 3 or 4 before they got it right with Alex Neil. So yeah, a big learning curve, but I think they learned a lot from that, which is all coming to fruition now.
And I guess what you've just said there speaks to the job really that Stuart Harvey did before his departure, and Christian Speakman. As you say, not 100% hit rate, but that's very hard to achieve in football recruitment. But for every Hamir or Nasrusen, there's been a Patrick Roberts or a Jack Clark, and it's really helped kick the club on, particularly financially, with a couple of key sales in the Championship. They were frugal in the Championship. They didn't spend too much money, but they still managed to recruit a promotion-winning side. And that's really helped Sunderland kick on in terms of PSR and financially in the Premier League.
It has, and hats off to Stuart Harvey. I think he's gone a little bit under the radar on all of this because he's moved on this summer. But, a lot of that work was done by him in the build-up to the Premier League season. And indeed, I understand that 2 or 3 of the players, maybe more, who are here now are as a result of Stuart Harvey's involvement. So that was key. He knows world football, very key in understanding South American football, especially Far East. But I think his real expertise has come around Belgium and the Netherlands and Europe, and we were seeing that reflected in some of the players that they've been signing from Belgian clubs and the Netherlands as well. All part of the whole. And you mentioned Christian Speakman. I think there's been a bit of revisionist historically going on there. Much maligned earlier on, but I think people are realising now the role that he's had to play within the football club, not only in recruitment but in terms of gelling the whole, if you like. He's had a big part to play there, and Florent Gisolfi coming in and saying he's been pleased with the way he's been able to work with Christian Speakman as well, which was there was a sort of a curiosity about how that relationship would work, I think, when Gisolfi arrived and who would be boss, if you like. But it seems that they work, together. Kyril would appear to be their boss, and it seems to be a relationship that's working.
Speaking to Phil about this as well, and just from a logistical standpoint, he made a really good point that having 2 figures like Speakman and Gisolfi actually allows Sunderland to cast the net wider in a transfer window. and work on more deals as well, which is something from a logistical standpoint that I hadn't actually considered. That, you know, these deals take a lot of communication, a lot of work, and having two people that can be across multiple things is a great benefit to Sunderland.
Yeah, and I think Florent Gisholfi talked about this the other week in saying that the two of them, they wouldn't have been able to do the business they've done this summer if they hadn't been together doing it.
Yeah.
So, you know, it just shows how much work has to be done in the Premier League, not just in terms of player recruitment, but the whole club structure has been modified, updated. The academy's going through a change, if you like, in terms of the way that's set up. Physically, you know, in terms of where the academy players train, where the first team players train. And so all this has got to be thrown in the mix, and all in the space of how many months since they played Sheffield United at Wembley. I mean, it's, you know, in footballing terms, it's been a whirlwind, but it's amazing what they've managed to achieve in that short space of time, and then to be sitting fourth in the Premier League on top of that.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, when somebody says to me Sunderland are fourth in the Premier League, I still have to sort of double check and make sure that it's actually real, because it feels so surreal. What is this, the third international break? Middle of November, unbeaten at home. I mean, if you'd have said that to us after the game at Wembley, particularly as you touch on, given that you have less time to get prepared, having got up through a playoff final, it's extraordinary, really.
I think it's phenomenal. I mean, I pinch myself, and I still think that, if we're all entirely honest with ourselves, in the summer, nobody would have predicted a fourth place after 11, 12 games, going to Chelsea, winning, drawing with Arsenal at home, scoring 2 goals against them, unbeaten at home, as you say, watching some really good football, some real quality in there. I know they make mistakes. Every team makes mistakes. They're learning. They're a group that's learning. They are developing. They're maturing. And I think we're learning to trust them. I think that's one thing we perhaps as Sunderland fans over the years have been so inured to failure and things going wrong that we're loath to trust the players. And when they say they want to do this or achieve that, sometimes there's a roll of the eyes. I think that's starting to evaporate, because the players now are proving that we can trust them with the results they keep on churning out. And yet they're going to go through a tough month or two now up to Christmas with the fixtures that are coming up and the African Cup of Nations. But they remain committed to this mantra that we're ambitious, we'll be okay. And Régis Le Bris backs that up as well. I think we can trust him, especially on the light of last season. And more than anything, that 5-game run when they were losing, when he didn't lose his nerve at all and just said, trust me. And so it proved. So I think that is something that supporters have learned now, is to trust the message, trust the players, trust the coaches, that they are getting it right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it, when you cover Sunderland and football generally, but everything's rosy in the garden at the moment, isn't it? But history tells us that you're only maybe as good as your last transfer window. With that in mind, what are you expecting from Sunderland coming into January? Because we're told that there's a little bit of PSR wiggle room. I would be very interested to see where Sunderland are on the table on January 1st, because perhaps then, as a club, they may start to sense a little bit of an opportunity, and I think that could be hugely interesting. We've seen that Kira Louis-Dreyfus can be really, really ambitious. There are a lot of caveats to January as well, aren't there, Barnsley, in terms of it's harder to get players out of clubs. Things tend to go late in the window, don't they? It's a bit more of an inflated market in terms of the summer, but I'm interested to see what sort of money is spent and the ambition of the club, to be honest.
I think they will be ambitious. I think, you know, I'm tempting fate a little bit here. I think they'll still be in a good position in the league. And I think in that respect, Kira Louis-Dreyfus's comments about, you know, we'll look at whether we're in the top 6 or the bottom 3. I think we're going to be looking more towards the top 6 than the bottom 3. And I think with that in mind, and the way that this team is growing and maturing, they're going to do business. I think Régis Le Bris there was a Premier League fans meeting last week in which he said he I think, to quote him, was 4 or 5 players could come in January, which wouldn't surprise me, because I think we all know there are areas that need strengthening. I think the midfield is the key, the wingers especially. And I don't think, you know, none of us are sort of going to sit back and say they don't need someone else up front to get more goals, because when you look at the goals scored column in the Premier League and you look at those top 6 teams, Sunderland is by far and away the lowest of the scorers. So I think, that's an area too that they will look to try and sharpen up. So I think, they will do business. But as you say, it's going to be more difficult in January, and clubs know that you're in the market, and that inflates prices to a degree. But I think Sunderland are in quite a nice position in that they don't need to do it. It's almost sort of I'm going to use the phrase vanity project, which I think is probably a little bit condescending, because it's not a vanity project. This is
anything in January is a bit of a Brucey bonus, isn't it?
It is, and I think that. But what I'm trying to say is that at the moment, the way this squad is developing, the way this team is playing, they don't need to bring in players, but I think they would feel more comfortable if they could bring in players to strengthen in the areas that we all think that the team does need that strengthening. So I think business will be done, but they won't be held to ransom. They won't play. They won't pay silly fees. They won't pay silly wages. They'll be sensible, and much in the way that the business they did in the summer was fantastic in terms of the fees that they paid and the players they've managed to attract. So in short answer, I think they'll do business, but they won't be held to ransom.
And what a prospect Sunderland have suddenly become, Barnsley, in terms of the league position, the connection. Le Bris talks about connection all the time, but they've got a really bright, young, forward-thinking coach who is also a pragmatist and will look after you. The fan base is united. The ownership knows what they're doing. It's seen now, Sunderland, I would imagine, is a really, really good place to go and play your football.
Well, it's certainly become more attractive than it was a year ago. I think
money obviously plays a part as well in that.
Of course it does. Look, we've got to be pragmatic about this. A lot of players will have come because the money's good, and I think it was one of the conversations we've had in the summer was the fact that a lot of these players won't have heard of Sunderland, won't know where Sunderland is, and they had to be sold the club. And to that end, the club put together a video of the city, the region, to sell that to prospective players. The Xhaka signing unquestionably was a key factor in attracting players. The club don't deny that, and we're realistic, and it's obvious that a player of his caliber is suddenly going to raise eyebrows, and people can start taking notice. Key to everything, of course, has been the form that Sunderland have showed at the start of the season. It's suddenly put them on the map. They're suddenly being noticed, and people are starting to talk about Sunderland. I even saw an article at the weekend in one of the national newspapers predicting the final league table, which so many people are trying to do. And interestingly, it's Manchester City that top this table, Chelsea second, Arsenal third, Sunderland seventh. And I must say, I would bite your arm off now for seventh, because that would be what a finish that would be in your first season back in the Premier League, which is reputedly, the most difficult league in the world. Everybody predicted the 3 promoted teams to get relegated, and incidentally, this particular prediction does predict Burnley and Leeds both to go down. So for Sunderland to achieve a top 10 finish would be a real feat.
Just as a little bit of an aside, do you think we've perhaps been guilty coming into AFCON and the festive fixture list? Have we overanalyzed it in a sense? Because I've made this point a couple of times now, but I look at Leeds' fixtures over Christmas, a few other clubs' fixtures. Everybody tends to play each other. It's always very busy. That festive fixture list always seems to throw up anomalies in terms of the results. Have we been a bit guilty of overanalyzing that? Is it not very similar for a lot of clubs? And then with AFCON as well, we all panicked, didn't we, about the 6 or 7 players that could go. But at the moment, Sunderland look like they have a little bit of depth in a couple of positions. I think key to that would probably be the fitness of Gertruida, who can play in multiple positions. But it's a catch-22, isn't it? Because it all feels a lot easier when you're 4th in the Premier League and playing well. But it just feels to me like a lot of those fears now, having seen Sunderland over 11 games, are minimised a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think a lot of it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about trust. And I think we've all sort of a little bit alarmist earlier in the season. 6, 7 players could go. What a hole that's going to leave in this team. But like you say, other teams are going to lose players. Sunderland, not all 6 or 7 will go through the whole of the tournament. so that they will start to drip back into Sunderland. And also the gaps that are left are fillable. I mean, I think the defence is pretty stable. They'll lose one or two, but on the whole, the defence is pretty much okay. It's not going to be harmed in terms of losses that much. Midfield clearly is, but at the moment, Adingra is not a regular first team starter. Talby's not a regular first team starter. Sadiqi's going to be the loss. Diarra's been injured. Reynaldo will probably be a loss, but we've already seen him. We've missed him for 3 matches, and he's a defender anyway, and they've got cover in that respect. So I think they've got the players to fill those gaps. And I think, bearing in mind that this discussion we've had about, is the team going to pick up points in the more difficult games? They picked up 3 points at Chelsea, and they picked up a point against Arsenal. Who knows what they might pick up against Liverpool and Manchester City? They've got the derby, which the old adage, the old cliche that form goes out the window. Bournemouth at home, and home form's good. Brighton away. You just with this team now, you just don't know. And if they keep picking up points, ticking over, get into Christmas, New Year, those important fixtures around then, players starting to come back, January window, I think they'll be okay. At some point they probably will lose 2 or 3 games on the bounce. Every team does, but I think there's an inbuilt belief within this team that they don't like losing a match, and they've got a real fight in them to win a 90-minute game or not to lose a 90-minute game. I think that will be reflected in the schedule as well. They won't want they won't want to lose games, and if they lose games, they'll want to bounce back. There's that culture is developed within this squad, and it's very, very strong. And I think that will hopefully see them through Christmas and the New Year into January.
I feel like that Leeds game at home on the 28th, Barnsley, that could go a long way towards shaping the narrative around Christmas. You get 3 points there. Perhaps if we beat Fulham at the weekend, then everything else, perhaps other than the Newcastle game, is maybe a little bit of a free hit, dare I say. Obviously, you'd be targeting Bournemouth at home, who are no mugs, by the way. But the point is, if you get a decent result at Fulham, you beat Leeds, then all of a sudden everyone's going, right, okay, anything else is a bonus.
But it's interesting because we talked about Chelsea and Arsenal both being free hits, and they came away with 4 points. Yeah. So exactly. It's very, very difficult to guess. I think how they're going to react. I think they do react well to mistakes, if you like. They the Arsenal game going 2-1 down, but they reacted well to that. Manchester United, okay, they lost the game ultimately. They went 2-0 down, but they reacted to that tactically and looked much, much better for it. You can go back to the Burnley game. They were fine in the first half. It's the second half was the blip, and that's where it didn't quite come together for them. But on the whole, as a team that can react to adversity, they're very good at dealing with it. So I think all these fixtures that are coming up, Régis Le Bris will be at pains to say we're only taking 1 game at a time, which I think is absolutely right at this level. The analysts and the statisticians and all the others can do all the background work for the games coming up. But I think the focus of people like Régis Le Bris and Granit Xhaka and the team will be very much on the next game. And then they move on because the pressures and the expectations are so high in the Premier League. I think if you go beyond that, your head would explode. So I can understand that philosophy in terms of, right, our concentration now is on Fulham. We won't look to Bournemouth until we've at 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon at Craven Cottage. Then you can start to look forward and learn from what we've done that afternoon at Fulham, whether that needs to be taken to the next game. Bear in mind as well, there's 2 players on 4 yellow cards, which could be an issue in the next couple of weeks. So there's a lot still to mull over and to watch how this team reacts to certain different situations which are going to arise in the next month.
What are your early thoughts on the Fulham game? Obviously, Le Bris has favoured a 5 at the back, hasn't he, against Arsenal, particularly Everton as well. Chelsea was a 5 at the back, so that seems to be his preferred formation at the moment. Could you see him switching that away from home against Fulham back to his 4-3-3?
I could and I couldn't. I mean, I think he's
hard to predict, isn't he?
It's hard to predict, which is good. I think from his point of view, he wants to keep the opposition guessing. I think he probably feels more relaxed now that the five's working and has worked well for him. He likes a 4 and he knows that will work for him as well. I think it's a good time to play Fulham. From what I'm reading about Marco Silva's under pressure, and he could be the next one that gets the sack if Sunderland were to win at the weekend. And so there's pressure and expectation on Fulham to turn around their poor start to the season, or relatively poor start to the season. So I think that, and Sunderland have this remarkable statistic of, they've not lost to a London team this season. And that won't be lost to them either, which is, bearing in mind, back in the day, it was the other way around. They hadn't won a London game for however many.
Yeah, you couldn't buy a win in London at one point.
No, exactly. And now, they're more than comfortable in their own skin when they're playing London teams. So I feel good about the game.
Sorry to interrupt. There was even talk about having a London training base at one point, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, there was. yeah, I remember that, which is absolutely lunacy. But anyway, as I said, I feel good about this game. I think it's a game that they know they can win. And will believe they can win. And I think we have to trust the players, as I've said before, that they can win. Again, it would just cement where they are in the Premier League at the moment. And don't forget, you're fourth for a reason after the number of games that you've played. You're not there by luck or, fate. You're there because you're a good team, because you've beaten the team. You're beating the teams around you. You're not losing at home. You're doing all the things you're meant to do if you want to be, a successful team, and they are at the moment a successful team, and they will take that into the game in London on Saturday. So again, yes, I feel I'm optimistic. I love going to Craven Cottage. It's a fantastic place to watch football.
It's a lovely ground.
Great atmosphere there. Go for it. I think in the past the record's not been bad there. They had that great FA Cup game the other year, which finished 1-1, and Chris Rigg was unlucky not to become the youngest scorer of an FA Cup goal, wasn't he? And
that was Abdullah Bar was offside,
right.
and I've never forgotten him since.
So the omens are good. I feel positive going into the game.
I'm really interested to see how we approach it, just because I've watched a little bit of Fulham this season and I haven't been very impressed at all. And I actually have them pegged for relegation when I was speaking to Michael Bowers in our live Q&A yesterday. Do you think Sunderland will try and attack from the off? Because it feels like a game where Sunderland could sort of really get at Fulham. But the sort of Sunderland fan in my brain, as well as thinking maybe don't get too cocky and confident, because we know what the Premier League can be like. You can be stung, and teams below you can produce results pretty quickly. Look at West Ham's revival, for instance.
I mean, the goal scoring is an issue. I think can't deny that. And until the Arsenal game, they were struggling to score the early goal. And I think there's a you talk about going gung ho. I don't think this is a team that will gung ho, but I think they've got to try and get the first goal. I think, especially in a game like this where there is pressure on Marco Silva and his position. I think if the opposition can score first and unsettle the home fans, can unsettle the opposition, then that's a good place to be. But at the same time, that going back to that gung ho, you don't want to concede the first goal either, because if that, I remember going when we went to Old Trafford, it was all the talk of it. If Sunderland take the lead here, Amarin's in trouble. And it sort of forgot the fact that they, I think Manchester United had won their last 2 home games, and as we saw in the afternoon, they played really well. So I think you've got to be cautious, but at the same time, you've got to believe that you've got the ability to take the game to Fulham. That they know they've got the ability to defend. So I think they've got to be a little bit brave. And I think if I was Régis Le Bris, I would be saying to my team, "Well, go out there, have a go early on, see if you can get that first goal, but don't throw it all away. If after 20, 25 minutes you haven't scored, don't make the silly mistakes that see you concede then and put yourselves on the back foot." So fascinating sort of technical battle, if you like, or a tactical battle. But I think, in these situations where a club and a manager's under pressure, they're positions that the team like Sunderland, the way that they're playing at the moment, have to take advantage.
Let's circle quickly back round to transfers, particularly outgoings, before we wrap up the podcast. But can you see any of the current first team crop leaving in January? I'm thinking perhaps more along the lines of a Dennis Cirkin and Dan Neil. Obviously, we know their contract situations. Anthony Patterson as well, not in the team. There's been a little bit of speculation about him. My thoughts on Cirkin would be with the African Cup of Nations. He might actually have a chance to start because Masuaku and Ronaldo are going to go off for a little period of time. With the three of them, I actually don't see them leaving in January unless Sunderland can source sort of high quality replacements. And I said this to Michael actually the other day that I almost feel like Sunderland might have bigger fish to fry in terms of the squad.
I agree with you. The Dan Neil situation is very, very interesting. It doesn't look like he's going to sign a new contract imminently, so his future is very much, got a big question mark over it. But I think the very fact that he decided to stay when he could have had the opportunity to leave in the summer sort of hints that he's prepared to give it a go this season in the hope that he does get games for Sunderland. Patterson, the club rate very, very highly. I'd be very, very surprised if they let him go. Cirkin, they are being very, very cautious about his rehab, if you like. He's getting game time, but they're not pushing it. They're doing it sensibly. I think he'll have a role to play at some point. I think they rate him highly. He's a good player. I think the general perception is he can play in the Premier League, and I think he'll want to stay at Sunderland. I think they'll keep the bodies on board in that respect. The players I think you'll see go are the likes of your Joe Andersons, those players, the Pembellis, etc. Pervaders, just not getting any sort of they'll be desperate, I suspect, to try and move them on. I mean, it's dead wood. It's money they're paying out. They don't want to have to pay out.
I don't even think some of them are registered, are they? Unfortunately,
so move them out, get them, move them on, clean up that side of it, if you like. But in terms of outgoings, I'd be very, very surprised if there's very, very much movement in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. Just in terms of Dan Neil as well, we've talked a lot about him quite a lot recently. Obviously, he's been playing for the under 21s. It's sort of a weird. If this is the end to a Sunderland story that we are now entering the final 6 months, it's sort of it's a very strange feeling, isn't it? With him having watched him break through in League One, he's played for Sunderland on all of the competitions, double promotion winner, all of that sort of stuff. It just feels bizarre to me, and I can understand it because you can't really argue with the logic with Sunderland sitting fourth in the Premier League with Granit Xhaka and Noah Sadiki. But it's a sad end, I think, to his Sunderland career if this is the end.
It would be if it is the end. I don't think he's not daft. I think he's well aware of the quality around him. And he's training with these players every day. He's watching the football. He knows how good it is. So he'll know that the challenge he's been set to get into this team. The big challenge for him, I guess, will be when he does get in the team, and I suspect he will get opportunities in December and January, is he has to grasp those opportunities. I've heard this so many times in the past from managers that say, look, I've had players knocking on my door, pleading with me to get a game. And then when they've played that game, they've done nothing and they've proved nothing. And sorry. And then they wonder why they're not getting included in the team. So I think that's the challenge that faces Dan Neil now. When he gets his opportunity, he's got to take it. He's got to take that opportunity and prove to Régis Le Bris that he's good enough. If he does that, then that door that's slightly ajar at the moment might be pushed open a lot wider for him. So it might not be the sad end of the story that we're all sort of hoping is not going to be the scenario, because we all want. There's nothing more than we want a Sunderland fan who's watched them since he was a boy to play for them in the Premier League. So fingers crossed, touch wood, that's how this pans out. But a lot is in Dan's lap. A lot of it is down to him, how he is in training, how he reacts, how he takes his opportunities when it does arise, and whether he can maximise that opportunity and prove that he's good enough to play in this team in the Premier League.
And football is funny, isn't it? We know that from the history of the club, through what we see on a weekly, daily, yearly basis. But things can happen, can't there? And all of a sudden, where you weren't expected to play, you can be given an opportunity or have it thrust upon you. And that's without AFCON or the busy festive fixtures. You never know. an injury happens, there's a bit of a crisis, and all of a sudden you're front and centre and you do well, and it can change on a dime.
Well, look, we're sitting here talking about Sunderland fourth in the table and not expecting that at all in the summer, and that in a way is a microcosm of all of that, isn't it? That is the one thing, is the last thing we all expected, and it's happened. So this team is changing the narrative now. It's changing the dynamics. It's changing the stories. Everything is changing for the football club and the city, and it's on the up at the moment. And you just can't predict. It would be glib to try and now predict what's going to happen, because it's happening so fast. It's happening, and the changes are so remarkable that who knows what discussion we'll be having at the end of May about the season that's just passed.
And we'll quickly round off just with your thoughts. I know you said it's very hard to predict there, but I'm going to press you for some predictions. What does this season feel like to you? I've heard a few statisticians say that Sunderland could perhaps drop off. Obviously, you've highlighted that scoring goals is a little bit of an issue in terms of not scoring as many as the teams around us. But if you had to put your life on it, where do you think Sunderland will finish this season? Will it be a drop off where they go into sort of lower mid-table, 14th, or is it, anyone's guess?
I think it's anybody's guess, and I don't think. I think there will be a drop off, but I would, if I was, I'll find a band of positions. I think they'll finish somewhere between 14th and 7th. I know that's quite a wide band, but I think it'd be in that mid-table. Which for a first season back in the Premier League would be remarkable, and that would be amazing. But after all the predictions in the summer that the three promoted teams would come straight back down.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us, Nick. Where can we find more of Nick Barnes over the next few days?
Well, back in for Total Sport every evening, 6 till 8. The programme runs. Then, of course, at Craven Cottage on Saturday afternoon for full commentary of the Fulham Sunderland game.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, head over to the BBC to find more of Nick Barnes and Gary Bennett and all of the Total Sport crew. And thank you for watching this Sunderland Echo podcast. You can head over to our website. Phil will bring you all of the pre-Fulham press conference news on Thursday, I believe it is. Once again, thank you for watching.